Good afternoon. Today we're going to look at some charts from the Council on Foreign Relations. They have a group of economic researchers there who are outstanding, and we respect them a lot. And these researchers spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the real Chinese numbers are. What is the real Chinese GDP, the real trade balances, the real figures on the Chinese reserve accounts. And for several years, they have written that the Chinese economy is much stronger than what Western media report. And they are making much more money than we think. Almost all the central bank operations in China are closed off. They're secret. And SAFE is a division of China that handles the international currency exchanges and transfers for imports and exports. Also, a lot of their outbound investments abroad, and they are not forthcoming with data either. They don't share data. But we can estimate fairly closely how much the Chinese are exporting and their income by studying how much is imported from China to everywhere else. And we've used this metaphor before, that figuring out the Chinese economy is like figuring out gravity. We can't see it, but we can feel it. And we know it's powerful, but we can only observe it and measure it by observing and measuring its effects on everything else. And these charts today involve China's manufacturing exports. Manufactured goods surpluses are what are exported from Chinese factories after satisfying domestic demand. Now, these are finished manufactured products, so it's not tea or aquaculture fish. And this chart goes back to 1963 and reports the surpluses from Germany, Japan, the United States, and China. And we can see that in 1963, Germany, Japan, and the US were all net exporters, but that the United States was already in decline relative to Germany and Japan. The US is the blue line, and we went briefly negative in 1973, bounced back, and then in 1981 or so, we went negative, and we've stayed there ever since, below zero. That means that the combined output of US manufactured product does not satisfy US domestic demand. We need to import from other countries. In 1993, China shows up for the first time, the red line, and they've been almost straight up ever since. In the next chart, they combined Germany and Japan, and they are represented by the black line. If we suppose that the US had our exports taken over by Germany plus Japan, now China is doing the same to them. A lot of the rise of China's exports is coming at the expense of Germany and Japan. This next chart is not good for the narratives and the conventional wisdom today regarding Mexico and Vietnam. This is the percentage of global exports for China, Mexico, and Vietnam. Mexico is in blue, and last year Mexico famously became the United States' #1 import country. We know that a lot of those Mexican exports are actually from Chinese companies in Mexico setting up there to get around the tariffs. But in absolute terms, it just doesn't add up to very much anyway. In 1996, Mexico was about 2% of global manufactured exports. And it looks like it may be a touch higher, maybe 2.5% now. Vietnam has gone from 0% to 2% or so, but we know that a lot of Vietnam's number, again, is Chinese companies in Vietnam, and they get around US tariffs by doing final assembly there. This is the last chart, and it's the percentage of total global manufactured exports. They have taken Germany out of the EU and broken out their numbers separately and added South Korea and India. The authors didn't include big economies here like the UK, Australia, Canada, African countries, and so that's why the numbers don't add up to 100%. But since this is by percentage, any gain by one country is a loss that's shared elsewhere. It's one pie, we're just carving up the pieces. In 1996, China was about 2.5% of global factory exports. Now it's 22%, about 22%. That means the cumulative from the rest of the world will be down 20% or so since 1996. The US has gone from 12% to 6, Japan from 10 to 4, Germany from 11 or so to 9. So 14 points out of China's 20 have come from the US, Japan, and Germany. South Korea, they're trending down since 2012, and India isn't moving the needle very much, at least not yet. This article is not paywalled. It's accessible to everyone, and I'll share the link in the video description. And I encourage you to read it. And we will say again that those guys at CFR do really outstanding work trying to figure out where all the money is going. And when we're talking about China, it's not easy to do that work. Brian Setzer is the main guy there, and he has lots of great columns on that website. He just does a great job. Have a nice weekend. Be good.
You cannot serve God and money. So do not be worried about your life, what you will eat, or what you'll drink, or what you'll wear.